Jolly good show, old chap.
Jolly good show. Good afternoon.
It's afternoon.
Welcome to the Kevlin and Trisha Chaos Show. So hopefully we should have. There we go. This is a little thing we prepared earlier. So we should ask who's heard of this? 97 things every Java program should know. Excellent.
Yeah, a little further in. Yeah.
So this is kind of our lockdown project. We finished it in 2020 during the first wave of lockdowns, and it was released. And we planned to launch it in 2020. That did not happen. So we just decided to launch it at every Java-related conference that we go to.
We had planned to give it to go to Amsterdam in 21, I think.
2020. In fact, it was the end of, back in those. Remember those days of optimism? It'll all be over by Christmas. Yeah.
And then, like last year, we were both like, "Oh, we did a book. Do you remember? We did a book.
Yeah,
we should do a thing.
We
for
should
the
do
book.
a thing." So here is the thing. So first question. I do get this question a lot. Why 97 things? We didn't choose the number. This comes from the original series, started by Richard Monson-Hafel. And basically, it came out of a set of recommendations. He wanted about 100. But 100 is a very obvious number. 99 and 101 are trying too hard not to be 100. They're being a bit obvious. But 97, that's also very search-friendly, as well as being a prime number. So that's why we've ended up with 97. And this was done as an open call. And we ended up with, here are the 97 things, conveniently alphabetically ordered.
You're not supposed to be able to read that. It's OK.
It's OK. It's not an eyesight test.
Because we do want you to buy the book.
Of course, yeah. But we also have a different path here as well. Many of these items are actually still online. There was an open submission, Medium, and we also did a separate submission through Google Forms. We ended up with 73 people included in the final book, which was awesome. And more importantly, we have some of them here, which is what we're going to do. We are going to, Trisha and I are going to introduce our own things, or one or two of our own things, and then we're going to wheel it out to the other victims, and each person has taken a completely different approach to how they want to present this.
Which is very much in the spirit of 97 things.
Exactly.
The whole point was that it's just a collection of things. It doesn't have to be themed. It doesn't have to be like cohesive, coherent.
Yeah.
It's just things.
Yeah, you will find that there are pieces in here that kind of half contradict each other. You'll find that there's a variety of approaches to presentation, which is good, because sometimes people ask you, how do you want me to write it? I don't know, how do you want to write it? You know, the whole point is to get all the voices there. So we've got that. But here, we do actually have a way that you can get your hands on.
We have an actual physical paper book.
Yeah, remember those?
I brought this all the way from Spain. So, and we can even sign it for you if you want. We haven't done that. But anyway, if you fill in...
Yeah, we haven't spoiled it yet, but if you want spoilers, we're absolutely...
Well, I mean, it did come all the way from Spain, so the corners are a little bit... It's fine. It's totally
authentic.
fine.
It's
the
authentic.
words are still there. It's OK. Yeah. So yeah, if you follow the QR code, put in your name, we will draw a winner before the end of the talk, and then we will mispronounce your name at the end of the talk, and you have to guess if that's you or not, and then you can come up and get the book.
Yeah. And apologies if we get your name right. Okay. So,
because that's not in the contract.
So, yeah. So, is everybody who wants that got that? Yeah, we good? We good? Yeah, sorry, I can't see the other.
I know they all snuck out while we were talking, and there's no one here.
Yeah, right. In which case, yeah, let's. I think.
Oh,
you
it's me.
are up. Yes, you're up next. And let me set the timer in that case.
All right. So I've got 5 minutes to talk about learn your IDE to reduce your cognitive load. When I wrote this piece, I was still working for JetBrains, and obviously I do a lot of presenting about IntelliJ IDEA and the IDE. And I feel a little bit like this piece has dated quite a lot in the last 6 months, because now everyone's using AI assistants. But try and remember I wrote this in 2020. And I usually do live coding, but it's really difficult to keep to 5 minutes, do live talking and live coding at the same time. So I have a video. I may or may not go into specific features. At the bottom, the keyboard shortcuts will appear if you're interested. The whole point about this piece, though, was that the idea about using the IDE, and probably these days AI coding assistants and similar tools, is not so much to show how clever you are, although it does look kind of cool when you get stuff right. But it's all about doing the heavy lifting, like we heard in the keynote, getting these tools to kind of do the boring stuff so that we can focus on what is it you actually want to achieve? How do you want to do that? What is the right way to express that? And then use the tools to just kind of generate the boring coding stuff. Looking back over this video again, I recorded this like less than a year ago, and like I say, it already starts to look a little bit dated, and I'm not using a coding assistant, as you can see. But I can't remember what I was going to say now, because I was thinking about how long 1 year is in technological terms. The idea is to kind of use the tools to reduce your cognitive load. Once you know what the tools can do for you, once you know how they can do the stuff that you don't want to do, then you can use them to kind of get stuff done. And this applies just as much for the AI assistants as well. One of the things that I've missed because the video's gone so fast is one of my favorite features in IntelliJ IDEA is using custom live templates. So that if you know the shape that you want your code to be, in this particular case, I want my tests to look this particular way. I have a custom live template, so my tests will always be generated in the way that I want them to be generated. So I don't have to think given, when, and then, and I don't have to do all the boilerplate stuff. So live templates is one of my favorite features for that. And one of the other things I wanted to show with this latter part of the video is, well, A, getting the IDE to generate code for us, which, you know, is not really news these days, but B, using the refactoring tools. And I think using refactoring inside something like IntelliJ IDEA or your IDE of choice, it doesn't have to be a JetBrains IDE, the refactoring tools allow us to, once we have working code that does what we want, which perhaps an AI gave to us, we can use the refactoring tools to reshape it, rework it, keep our tests passing, because you still need tests, okay? Preferably ones you wrote and not the AI. Don't generate the code with the AI and generate the tests with the same AI, because, I mean, that's like 1 = 1. Great. But once you have the code that works, use the refactoring tools to kind of reshape it, move stuff around, see what feels right for you, go back, undo things if you want to, and find the thing that works for you. And keep the code always green, always passing, always working. So you do kind of, you benefit from learning particular things about how to use the IDE. And it doesn't have to be the same features that I use, but learn the things which are effective for you so that you can just use the muscle memory to get stuff done. And then you can be thinking about, how do I solve this problem? And what do I want it to look like at the end? And hopefully do your tests pass. I've still got more video. Yeah, refactoring, yes. So that's, I mistimed it slightly. But yes, that's the end of it. I don't think I had anything else on that piece. I think you should use the IDE.
Woo! With a whole minute to spare. Now, I have a terrible sense of timing, so I'm actually going to use my own timing here. Some of you may have got, did anybody go to my session last year on Program with Guts? It was a deep dive. Thank you. Excellent. That was like 3.5 hours. We're going to do that in 5 minutes. OK? So, you know, I'm going to talk real fast. OK, so Program with Guts. So the question is, so you're writing unit tests. Let's just assume the answer is yes. OK? Good. And that is fantastic. But the question is, are they any good? This is a question people often don't ask. They often stop at, oh, we've got tests. That's sufficient. Yes, tests of themselves are good. Not necessarily. So let's understand, do you have guts? Now, guts is a term that was introduced by Alistair Cockburn. And it was an observation. As he said, very many people say TDD when they really mean, I have good unit tests. I have guts. Because sometimes people are looking for a word, first of all, that they can put on their CV that everybody will recognize. But they're reaching for something. Basically, they're saying, we are doing better stuff with testing than we used to. What is the word for that? What is the phrase for that? And the nearest they find is TDD. And you look at what they're doing, and you know what? It's not TDD. But they are doing something good. Guts is not a way of doing something. It is what you leave. It's what you leave for the next person. Okay? It's you commit guts. The process that you got there. TDD is a process. Okay? It's a workflow. So this is the question. One does not necessarily imply the other. What does this stuff look like? Because if we haven't got guts, have we left technical debt for the next person in line in our test base? So what does that mean? what do we mean in practice? So let's just have a look at this one. Our friend, the stack, okay? Just as a general historical note, the stack as an abstract data type is 41 years old this year. Barbara Liskov introduced this in 1974. If you're thinking that name sounds familiar, Liskov substitution principle, that is her. So she basically came up with abstract data types and stuff, 73, 74, first published paper with a stack. So she's to blame or to praise for this. I'm going to make mine a strict stack. I'm just going to have a strict pop, keep things simple. And if you try and get the top of something that's not there, kaboom. If you try and pop something that's not there, kaboom, okay? We're going to see some optionality later, but we'll discuss that differently. We're just going to treat this as it is. So this is how a lot of people will then go ahead and write their tests. In fact, there are also code generators that will allow you to do the wrong thing like this. Yeah, this is the great thing about code generators that you don't control or you don't actually put you into them. They will generate garbage like this. And this is garbage, and most of the tools generate this. Because they go, oh yeah, you're going to test the constructor. How do you propose to do that? So the first thing is, let's just look at this and observe the fact that what we've just done is told everybody that these are tests. I think we know that because the word test is all over it. Okay? If the reader has not figured out these are tests, honestly, putting that word in is not going to help them. Use the bandwidth more meaningfully. Right, so then people end up with stuff like this. This is a variety of test smells that I have seen, and you have probably seen, and you may have done, and I will confess I might have done them a couple of times. But you try and think, I need more words. I need to be more expressive. Constructor is correct. You see, that's much better than constructor. No, it isn't. Depth is okay. Is working. My favorite one I saw 2 years ago, sorry, ++ 2025. Pop works as expected. The Enigma. What are you expecting? I have no idea. Is your expectation the same as mine? But I've used more words. It must be more meaningful. And I'm sorry, Java folks, honestly, use fewer words. I mean, just honestly, some of the names that you come up with for classes are just, they have their own gravitational field. They're so long. But I do want you to use words wisely. I do want you to be expressive. We just need to figure out what we mean. So, but we also end up with stuff like this. This is another smell. Can be constructed, has depth, has top. This is just another way of saying test constructor. But there's something else here that's not right either, because it doesn't always have a top, and it can't always be pushed. So you end up with sometimes has a top. Can sometimes be pushed. Again, the Enigma. Give me answers. You're giving me questions. So now, we're moving into the right space. A new stack is empty. An empty stack throws when queried for its top. Let's resize this, because this is what we're getting here. Let's actually turn this into something that has space separation. Next best thing, underscores. We can use an annotation for this, replace underscores, which gives us a specification. This is what you're trying to say. This is how I want you to use your words. A new stack is empty. An empty stack throws when queried for its top. If you want it to do something else, you can look at that and go, oh, that should be slightly different. And you're now reasoning about that. So that's telling me that I'm done, except that I'm not. Because I'm going to take the minute that Trisha had spare. This is totally how it works.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Award-winning. I'm going to take that award-winning minute and use it wisely. So this is what you've got. Restructure it. This is a state model. A new stack is empty. An empty stack does. And then we find, actually, we can structure that. In other words, there's an opportunity for you to specify and think aloud. This is not a testing activity for correctness. It's a clarification. It's a specification. So I hope that's been useful. And you're off to revisit some tests now. OK. Brian. You have.
Let's see if this works. 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, that's a.
You didn't have any minutes to spare for me?
Nope.
No, sorry, mate.
So 4 minutes. All right. I'm going to talk about dependencies, because how do you need to look at your code? First of all, if you put your application in production, say this is the binary that you put into production, how much of that binary is the code you wrote? OK, let me put it differently. Who does not use any form of a framework or a library? You're lying. So well, if this is your binary, this is probably the code you wrote. And who does code reviews? Okay, the rest of you does pair programming, that's great. But so at least we care about that little tiny piece of code, and that's great because that's what makes a difference between boilerplate stuff and the actual stuff that the LLM created for you. But we take good care of that. But how about that big, big yellow bowl? Do you actually know how many dependencies you have in your application? Guess what? A couple of years ago, I wrote this tweet. And I misused Spring Boot as much as you can misuse it. I took the scaffolder, I wrote 4 lines of code, and these 4 lines of code just represented an endpoint that gives you hello world. Super useful, right? So 4 lines of code, 33 jars, almost 10,000 class files, and over 500,000 lines of code. And guess what? If one of those lines of code has a mistake, a problem, or a security bug, it's not the framework's fault. It comes back to you, and we need to fix it. So we need to take good care of these dependencies. Let me get you back to, say, 15 years ago when I worked for one of the major banks in the Netherlands. I looked at their monolithic application. It was a Maven application, and this is a snippet of the Maven file. This line 977 to 1023, and these were dependencies. And as you can see, once a dependency gets in, it never gets out. We just put something on top of that, and on top of that, and it turns out in this application there were 3 different third-party XML marshallers, or serializers, which is weird because the JDK already gives you the capability to do XML serialization and deserialization. But what we see is that things go on top of other things, and on top of other things, and we don't even actually know if all these libraries are actually used or not, and in what capacity. Because I don't know this framework, let's use that other framework because I need to make this work in time. That is great, but do you actually know if that is still in place? And more openly, all these capabilities and all these libraries are part of your class path and can technically be loaded in memory and therefore be part of an attack chain if you look at it from the security perspective. So one thing you should do is scan it. Make sure that the libraries, even if it's a library that brings in a library, that brings in a library, that brings in a library, that you know what's going in and how safe they are. But next to that, you need to make sure that it's sanitized. Get things out, but also make sure that you update to the right thing. And how do you do that? Not by manually looking at the internet. One of the things you can do is just use Maven or use Gradle. Look at if there is a new version available. You can automate this. So use that every time you run your pipeline if there's already a newer version of your library available. Next to that, you can automate that as well with different tools to make sure that they crawl your GitHub repository or whatever and say like, hey, there is a new version of the Undertow library from 2.2.13 to 2.3.13, and to make sure that you are up to date. But because guess what? If something goes wrong with that library, and it's like 3 or 4 levels deep, and you are not at the latest version of a certain library, and you need to update because it's a security vulnerability. Guess where were you December 10th, 2021? Yeah, you feel that pain, right? So you need to update that. But say you're 5 major versions behind, good luck. Then you need to update, and your Spring Boot needs to update, your Hibernate layer needs to update, everything needs to update. So if you keep that in track, just like you need to do maintenance on your car or your house, of everything you own, you need to do the same with the libraries and dependencies in your application. So the only thing that I want to say is, don't only look at that piece of code that either you created or AI generated, but also look at all the dependencies that you have, because they're just as much part of your application as the code that you wrote. Thank you.
Right, okay. You have the power, so if you click, it should go to, yes, and there you are, right. Oh, there we go.
Magic of technology.
Magic of technology.
Yes, and exactly that's what I want to talk about to you. And even though we wrote these pieces some months ago, I think this one has aged quite well. Because technology is here, and it's even more important as time goes by. And our future, it is very challenging. And the challenges and the difficulties are going to increase. And either you love it or you hate it. We're here, we're now. in this morning, in the keynotes, where we're talking about AI and how some of our jobs are going to be discarded or lost, Keisha was talking about how do we upskill, how do we keep relevant, how do we still build software that it's important. And one of the things that I want, and I have always thought, is that software, up to now, it was written by humans. That's why it's important to leave for the developer behind us something that is understandable and meaningful. But it was also the whole point of writing software is to improve human life. So software and technology still has humans at its core to create the problems and to find the solutions. So how do we find the solutions? And this is something that is so dear to my heart. I'm a technical person, very technical person. And technology, for me, is not that difficult. I mean, there is a huge amount of things to learn, but it's not difficult. For me, the difficult part was the soft skills. Let me tell you a secret that is not so secret. I came into technology working with computers because I'm not extrovert. If you see me here, you say, like, she likes to talk in public. I can talk in public. I sometimes enjoy it, but I'm an introvert. So I said, like, what career can I pick where I don't have to interact with people? Yes, and the joke was on me because today I spend all day long talking to people. And so that's why one of the session that I'm here, I'm presenting in several conferences about soft skills. Because soft skills is the hardest thing for me. So I went into research mode and I said, why am I so bad at this? There has to be a manual because I'm coming from technology and I know manuals over there. So I learned some stuff about building teams, about communication, about psychological safety, about all the things that I thought that they were not going to be needed in my profession. And now I know that that's actually the key to solving problems. I'm from Mexico, living in Switzerland, so I didn't grow up with cold weather and snow and ice. So my blind spots are different to your blind spots. And that's the whole point of building diverse teams. I want to have a group of people that have the craziest ideas, that we don't share the same blind spots, that we can construct something innovative, creative. But how do we do that? How do we create a room where everybody can share the ideas, where we actually create these opportunities? And my piece was about that. I can give you a bunch of articles, papers, book. Like, honestly, if you come to me, this is what I do. When I have a question, I go deep. So I can tell you how to improve your team dynamics in the software development domain. And what I want you to take out with you is that we are different. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is not only about looking at more women in this room. Yes, that is important, and I support that. But it's also about understanding how different we are and cherishing that and allowing us the space to voice out our questions, our concerns, our differences. And also, not about who is around me, but it's also about understanding ourselves. Like I know that this sounds like far-fetched for a technology person, but when I learn about, like, for example, my emotional triggers, when I learn about my ways of communicating, like, if you want attract Excel attention, don't send her Slack channels with multiple small messages about a specific issue. Send her an email where you establish all things and ask for what do I need from Excel. That's how Excel works the best. So now when I join a development team, I have my Excel's manual. You should, like, feed Excel, that's important. Chocolate is the best. But anyway, no, the important thing is meetings before 9 and before 11 a.m. are not the best. Email works fantastic. And things like makes my life, my work life better. And I also ask the same from my teammates. How do I interact with you? Because you're a human with its all complexities, with its all ideas. How do I create this working, successful, based on respect work relationship? Listen to yourself and your team. One of the reasons why I think we're struggling in computer science or software development is because we are at crossroads. And as I said, we love technology. We all are all about process. But at the center is also a very creative and innovative, kind of innovative, for those that are sometimes stuck in refactoring projects, maybe not so much, but anyway, it's an innovative way of solving things that matter in our world. So I really hope that you have a second view and a new view into your development teams in the human factor and be more open into learning the soft skills that is the hardest part of technology. Because if you watch carefully, things will surprise you. And maybe they are not exactly how you think they are. And you can find me over there, and yes, I love open source, and I do a lot of community stuff. So thank you very much.
Cool talk. Should I click by myself?
If you click it by yourself, you will suddenly transform into Adam.
So
It's amazing.
transformed to Adam, and Kevlin asked me whether I could speak about the book, 97 Things, and I couldn't remember. I wrote it. I wanted to answer, I never wrote such a thing, and then I said, okay, this was not a book, it's just one pager. What I learned from you today, it was never published, right?
It was published.
It was published,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Then I'm also co-author of the book. And the next problem I had, I forgot what I wrote. So I was in the airplane yesterday and tried to open, couldn't find it, because it was written in Scrivener. This is like an application, and there was no license anymore, so I couldn't open that. So, but I managed to do this, and let's click it, and this is what I wrote. And I say, why I wrote it back then? It was like 2020, I think.
2020.
And what I remember, I was in charge as a Java developer in multiple front-end applications, larger ones, and they asked me constantly what we should do. And I said, okay, let's do the Java way. So what we always did is what Brian also said a bit, no dependencies, no vacations, no migrations, just standards, which works well. And we said, okay, what if we start just with web standards and forgot all the frameworks? I was a little bit afraid yesterday because I thought, okay, 5 years later, does it still work, the idea? And the cool story is, it works even better. I did some research, actually. All major frameworks right now support web standards like web components. So it means the web components is the thing in React, Angular, everywhere you can use web components. And there are even nice things like HTMX, this is back to the roots, looks almost like JSPs. And there's also Redux, what I suggested back then, and lit HTML. So the idea was, what if we don't have any dependencies? We just focus on the core. What happens then? And cool still happens. So all the applications are still in production. So what means is, in production means we never had to update something. The code was very simple to get, because the entire documentation is on MDN, Mozilla Developer Network. This is the JCP for Java developers. This is for interested web developers. And back then, there was lots of discussion. Is jQuery a thing? I think jQuery is no more the thing, because we have query selector in DOM, so you don't need jQuery anymore, I guess. Who uses jQuery? You? No, I think Kevlin. And it gets even more interesting. So what happens right now is the last line. It was no more in the book. But the new JavaScript becomes more and more like Java. So they're even thinking about introducing types right now, which they learned a lot from TypeScript. And if you know TypeScript, this is almost like Java. Now, 2 minutes to go. Now, it is not in the book, because this was more like web standards. But what you can do in Java with it, I think with modern Java, but this is more about my next talk after this show here, with modern Java, Java 21, 22, 23, what we can do is we can actually forget more and more dependencies and focus more on the core, which help us to have more vacations, of course, less migration. Less dependency means less bugs in production. And what we do, we use all the new modern Java features. How it's called data-oriented programming is the super pattern, but all the pieces help us to write leaner code, less bugs, and focus on Java capabilities. So the base idea always is start with the primitives, always with the primitives. If they work, you deliver a simple system. This is understandable, and it is stable. Stable means it won't change that much. The more you use higher level frameworks, libraries, whatever, the more you are depending on the libraries, and the more you have to migrate over time. And the more you have to learn, right? Because the higher level libraries, they follow complete different ideas. For instance, in the book I compared Angular 1 was completely different to Angular 2. And Angular 2 is completely different to React. But web standards will never change. Because if they change the web standard, they break all the browsers. I think I have 40 seconds to go. Any questions? No? Then thank you. And thank you for invitation to the book. Was perfect.
Where'd you put the clicker?
No, the clicker is here. So we've got the situation where Adam was unaware that he'd had the thing published in the book. Nikolai submitted a number of pieces to us, but we had a limit of 3, and you submitted 2 pieces on optional.
That's
and this is the one that was published.
Yes, that is true. And I think you should totally read this, get the book for that, but I'm going to talk about something else. OK, so Java 8 introduced optional, mainly so that you can have a safe continuation of stream pipelines without having NPEs. So this is null pointer safe. And still, it caused a lot of discussions. But the question is why, and what could you learn from those discussions? And I think for that makes sense to look in the 3.5 camps of how to use optional. Get that guy some mic and a light.
The mic doesn't work. And there it goes. Optionals suck. They're an absolute misfit into the language. They don't fix null. They're awkward to use. They're awkward to integrate. Never use them anywhere.
Wow. That was quite the rant. Thank you very much,
Justin.
Mr. Guy in the first row. So do I get, I think we got somebody here from the JDK team who maybe has an opinion on that. Where would that be? Where did Brian go? Did he? There he is. So maybe we can get some light here as well. Brian, what do you think about that?
Well, I just wrote the thing, so I can't really speak authoritatively, but I'm told that it was designed to be used as a return value. And when you use it as a return value, its so-called disadvantages just kind of go away because serialization doesn't matter and heap effects get optimized away. So not for fields, not for method parameters. Use it as a return value where you need, wait for it, optionality.
OK, thanks. So any more opinions we got on that? Yeah, there's one more here. That guy already has a mic, I think.
We're on the Brian run here.
Obviously, I have an opinion on things. I always have an opinion on things. But returning null is always error-prone. So never return null, always return an optional in that case.
OK, so never where it's error-prone. Returning error-prone always. We got more? Anybody else? Somebody else up there. Yes, go.
Yeah, so I think you should use it all the time, everywhere, and don't look back, right? The API might not be perfect, but it's pretty good, and it beats out explicit null checking everywhere. The frameworks support it. The performance argument only applies if you see a performance problem, and then you can figure it out. There's no strong argument against it either, but only good arguments for it. The problem isn't the NPEs. It's that null encapsulates 2 distinct cases. It ends up representing both purposeful and unpurposeful return types that hopefully you have to read the documentation if it exists to figure out which one. But in all cases, in my opinion, it's always a bug. So design carefully to avoid optionality, but when you have it, use it.
Yeah, thanks. OK, so now we got, again, don't use it at all. Use it as a return type where it's error-prone. Returning null is always error-prone. Or after you've avoided optionality as much as you can, just use it wherever you're left. Now, the important part about this is, so these are like 3.5 camps. I'm decidedly in that guy's camp, which is why it was so hard to find somebody, because I do use optional everywhere. But if that's not your style, maybe start with the JDK's opinion as a good default. Most importantly, though, decide as a team what you want to do, right? It's always easier to make rules more relaxed than it is to make them stricter. So find a good starting point and agree on what to do. Don't fight each other in edit wars. It just gives you the worst of all worlds, plus a ton of frustrations. I yield my time. Thank you.
Wow. Is it me?
Yeah.
I am super impressed, Nikolai, because when he said he wanted to involve the audience, I was like, oh, God, this is not going to work.
Yeah.
It's going to take ages. So
Yeah, this is why he's on last. So, you know, or rather, almost last. But it's a case of like, oh, this is just going to be chaotic. We're going to smash into the next session, which is fine because it's Adams, and that's OK.
It's OK. It's all right. We use
but
his 3 minutes.
Well done for keeping on time.
And
you
thank
know.
you to
so
the,
you can use his minutes.
contributors. Yeah, I'm going to use his minutes. Great, because I had spare minutes last time. Right, we're going to do a bit of a body swap. And not really, obviously. And I'm going to do one of Kevlin's pieces, and he's going to do one of my pieces. So Kevlin wrote the piece Name the Date. And I picked this one because I like the paraphrasing of Pride and Prejudice. So it is a truth universally acknowledged that a single programmer in possession of the belief they understand dates and times must be in want of a code review. I feel this strongly in my bones. I used to do my time, when I worked at MongoDB, I did my time on Stack Overflow answering questions, theoretically about MongoDB. But there was always a lot of questions about date and time, particularly in Java. So I kind of got to see firsthand people's confusion around date and time. And it's one of these things that we think we know because, you know, we live in date and time, so it's easy. But it's very, very easy to get wrong. However, we're not actually going to talk about that. But we are going to talk about java.util.date. I am sorry if anyone in the audience worked on this, because we do have some Oracle folks. So pretend I'm not saying any of this. The problem with date is that date is not actually a date. It is a date and time. GetDate does not get the date. It gets the day of the month. And getDay, like, what does that mean? Are we getting the day of the week, the month, or the year? Like, these things are, they should be so straightforward. We understand, in theory, the domain of date, and yet one of the simple concepts that's been in Java since the beginning is difficult to work with, just from a naming convention point of view. The example Kevlin gives in the book is that Apollo 11 landed on the moon at 2017 on the 20th of July in 1969. But actually, if you put this into a date object and ask for the time, you get that. Like, OK, that's not a time, but OK, that's millis since 1970, obviously. GetDate returns 20. OK, that's the date, the 20th. GetMonth returns 6, because, of course, months are indexed by 0. Days are not. Thanks. Helpful. How many times have you been bitten by that bug? Oh, like everyone in this room. And getYear returns 69 because, you know, computers are expensive and it's just too difficult to put the 19 in front of the 69. And in the book, Kevlin talks about how really a lot of this could be saved by better naming. I mean, you took the mickey out of like long Java names, but then you also suggested that these should be longer. For example, get day of week, or get millis since 1970. A little bit of extra naming would go a long way here. So, oh my goodness, that's the last slide. I've forgotten completely. So the point is not necessarily to pick specifically on java.util.date, although please, if you are still using it, don't use it anymore. There are at least 75 replacements since date was in Java. Please use the more recent version, which came in Java 8, recent version. Was it like 12 years old? Or older, because time just flies. So it's not just about picking on date. The lessons you can learn from this is A, don't use date, and B, when you're naming your own methods, when you're naming your own classes, when you're thinking about people calling your stuff, please have a thought for the poor developer calling your method, and have a think about what is the principle of least surprise when they ask for a time and they get a negative long. Like, what is that? So please name your methods and classes according to how you expect people to use them. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to say that you are not alone in thinking that Java 8 was really recent. It was 11 years ago. Does anybody else feel that Java 8 was recent? Is it just us? OK, there's a few hands going up. You are our elderly tribe. OK, so in my role as Trisha, I want to focus on technical interviewing. Is a skill worth developing? And there's a number of points that Trisha makes in this. I mean, the first one is a really important one. Our industry is horrible at interviewing developers. We're just not very good at it, because sometimes we think that we're after trying to assess the skill in a kind of book style, because we don't actually sit them down and say, yeah, here's the work environment, here's the tool chain, here's some code. Your job is going to be to work with people and code and tool chains. So what we're going to do is we're going to ignore all of that and ask you some technical questions that you could probably look up online. But we want you to memorize those. But they also show a bias. And the thing here is to remember that your skills as a developer are not the same as your skills at interviewing. So if you've ever suffered a bad interview and you think, you just walked away going, I'm no good or whatever, don't worry. It is a separate skill. Of course, there's an interconnection, but it's not the same skill. Just like any skill, you need to remember that something like your CV or your job application is not to get you the job, it's to get you the interview. Okay? And so therefore, the interview there plays a particular role, and each one of these is different. They are not 100% drawn on your technical skill with code, with tools, or the harder technical skill of people. So you can learn how to do it. It means you can go out and ask questions online and say, OK, what are the typical Java questions? And there's a bunch that you can prepare for, but it's also worth reading between the lines. So this is available information. It becomes familiar. You can look at the certification stuff to get a sense of the kinds of things that certain organizations will ask. But also be aware that sometimes when they ask, that tells you about them. Because if somebody is coming at you with like all kinds of multi-threading stuff, and they're asking really detailed questions about things that you know you shouldn't be doing, you know what they're doing. Okay? So if they spend too long on this, then you might not want to work there. Okay? So there is that point. If they are not focused on, forget all the synchronized stuff. Yeah, that's kind of nice to have, but actually use higher level construct. Use the concurrency utils. Focus on immutability and strong separation of concerns. If that's not their language and they're asking you tricky questions about synchronized blocks, you might want to end the interview early. Just saying. Don't forget, interviews are two-way. Compiler gotchas. Compilers. That's the job of the compiler. It's good to know when you're looking at the language, it's good to be able to distinguish and go, aha, I am looking at Java, not JavaScript, not C#. You want to be at that level. If you're not, then I suggest a little bit of work and some time out and coming to conferences like this will be in your interest. But some of the weirdisms and edge cases and some of the stuff going on with generics, and this is what the ability to extend your intellect out into the ChatGPT and Google space is for, because that's what you'd normally use. But there are a few things that are worth knowing and will come up again and again. Get familiar with those, because if it helps you with the interview, that's absolutely fine. And the data structures, your collections, these are just generally worth knowing because they go further than just understanding. These are just not simply the data structures that you pick up in a data structures book. They are things you're going to use on a day-to-day basis. You might not want to use an array list for everything. Okay, I know there are places where array list is the thing. You might actually want to branch out into crazy ideas like using maps of various things. And if you happen to have something that holds things uniquely, sets. So the point here is to understand that they are a way of thinking, just as you'd know when to use primitive types, just as you'd know when to use other constructs. Approach them from that angle. You might not know everything about the APIs, and the differences at that level, but become familiar with them from a usage point of view, allows you to talk confidently about how they are used, not simply about the constructs themselves. So, importantly, if you haven't been able to read between the lines of what you're being asked and go, I definitely don't want to work here, also ask questions back. Interviewing, people often say it's a two-way process. Sometimes people don't feel comfortable with that. But do remember that is your job, is to establish, are these people that I want to work for, do they know what they're asking? Because I have actually had that one where I took a job, it was many years ago, in a century far, far away. I took a job, and it turns out that when I got through it, and I thought, yeah, these are really tough questions. It turns out they didn't know the answers. They were just interested in just, well, he seems to know stuff. Yeah, we could do with that here. It was an absolute fire. It was just like, you know, it's just disastrous. So yes, thank you very much. Right. So here we are.
All right. We have a winner that I can mispronounce. Panche Chavkovsky. Oh, up there.
There's hands there. Well, you're no good up there, mate.
You might have to come down here.
Yeah, we're here. The book's here.
He's right in the middle. Can you send a minion?
We've learned about the people skills. You know, people collaborate.
I wonder if I should get a pen and we should sign it.
I have a pen somewhere, but we can do that one afterwards.
Do that later.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
If you want, you don't have to have it signed. If
you don't have to have it signed, and we won't be totally hurt or anything.
It's fine.
You know,
it's okay.
But don't forget, you've also got some of the contributors here as well.
So ask the other folks as well. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Well done.
Right.
We've got 2 minutes for
We've
questions.
got 2 minutes for questions.
I
Right.
am
We've done the
astounded.
97 things question. We absolutely nailed the time. Thank you, Nikolai, and previous speakers, and not us because we overran.
Who's got questions?
Questions.
There, in the middle. Do we sell the book here somewhere?
No, I don't think
bookshops.
so. All good, yes, all good bookshops and online venues
Not
and
anymore,
so
because
on.
O'Reilly used to come with their
Yeah.
stand, didn't they? No,
Yeah,
but they're not doing that anymore.
they've kind of gone a little more virtual these days. So no, not available. That's probably the only copy in the building. Don't mug him. He's a nice guy.
Any more questions?
Any more questions?
I mean, there could be loads of hands.
There could be
there.
loads of hands, or
Is that a question, or is that like I'm just scratching my ear?
that is a question.
When do you remove what? When is null going to be removed from Java? Brian.
Brian. That's exactly what it's just like,
Never.
This is a redirect.
Oh, come to Brian's talk tomorrow. Excellent.
There we go.
What a great
That's
segue.
a perfect segue.
Awesome.
Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you.